The Salzkammergut Lake District in Austria is known as the Devil's Dustbin. At the end of World War II, rumors spread that the Nazis came here to hide Europe's plundered gold.
Gold oiled Hitler's war machine. Gold was essential to Hitler.
As the Allies closed in, the Nazis started hiding their loot wherever they could.
I saw them throwing the boxes into the lake.
And there's one lake so deep and so remote that it's said to have been the Nazis' favorite dumping site, Lake Toplitz. The stories of what's been dubbed the Nazis' El Dorado have obsessed treasure hunters for the last 70 years.
Man stops thinking logically when it comes to gold.
When a team of divers explored Lake Toplitz for the first time.
On the monitor, I could see there is something there.
They didn't discover gold, but something every bit as extraordinary. The dying days of World War II. Hitler was in his bunker, unable to accept defeat. But most Nazis knew the game was up. It was time to start hiding evidence of their crimes. A unit of SS officers were instructed to transport boxes to the Salzkammergut Lake District in the Austrian Alps. But their mission ground to a halt. The road didn't go as far as the lake they'd been instructed to reach. They needed alternative transport to get their secret cargo to its destination, Lake Toplitz. Ida Weisenbacher was 21 years old when the SS woke her grandfather demanding assistance.
At 5 a.m. they called, and straight away they were at the door, the two SS men. They needed a horse and cart to get to Lake Toplitz. And then my grandfather said, that's not possible. The horses haven't been fed yet. No, they needed the horse and cart. It was really important. You've got to harness the horses.
Ida Weisenbacher was terrified for her life and quickly followed instructions.
They said it has to be done quickly. The boxes have to go to Lake Toplitz.
But Ida noticed something that puzzled her. The boxes weren't all the same.
There were heavy ones and light ones. They were different, big and small. The small ones were heavy, really heavy.
Ida asked what was in the heavy boxes, but was met with a stony silence.
The SS man who came with me didn't give anything away. I asked, where are you from? He wouldn't tell me anything. It was all very strict. Everything had to disappear in great secrecy.
Ida made the journey 3 times, and when they got to the lake the second time, she witnessed something bizarre.
When I got back with the second load, I saw them throwing the boxes into the lake.
She didn't realize it at the time, but what Ida Weisenbacher witnessed may have been one of the final acts of the biggest bank heists in history. The sheer scale of the Nazis' theft of Europe's treasures was astonishing.
The plunder of Europe was, from the beginning, a part of the Nazi war plan. It was their idea to collect everything which was valuable across Europe.
The Nazis plundered the museums and private collections of the newly occupied countries for priceless works of art.
Hitler was an art fan, and he was fascinated by art, treasures. He collected things. He tried to get hold of ancient paintings, ancient statues by famous painters, by famous artists.
Hitler's deputy, head of the Luftwaffe, Hermann Göring, personally amassed a vast collection of looted art and gold, sent to him from across occupied Europe, estimated to have been worth $200 million. But from the beginning, what the Nazis wanted most of all was gold. Gold bars that could be stored in bank vaults and exchanged for foreign currency whenever it was needed.
It started in 1938 with the occupation of Austria. They took the national reserves of Austria the moment they entered Vienna. They continued in Czechoslovakia and went on, because what the Nazis, of course, needed was gold.
The Nazis stole $2.5 million worth of gold from Czechoslovakia, $200 million worth of gold from France and Belgium, and later in the war, $30 million from Hungary and $100 million from Italy.
The Nazis stole the gold from the gold reserves of the countries that they conquered. Gold was essential to Hitler. Everybody has the mythical idea that Hitler was and Germany was rolling in money as it is now. But in fact, Germany didn't have enough food to feed its people.
In total, Berlin accumulated $500 million worth of foreign gold, the equivalent of over $36 billion in today's money. Gold fed the Nazi war machine.
They smelted down the gold, they stamped it with fake stamps as if it came from the Prussian mint, and they sent it to Zurich, and the Swiss gave them foreign currency for it.
Swiss banks became complicit in the Nazis' theft of Europe's gold.
An American investigating group determined that of the $400 million, which is a lot of money then, 50 years ago, of the $400 million that was sent to Switzerland from Germany, 300 million of it was stolen.
There is a reason why the Nazis never attacked Switzerland, because it was their banking place. It was their way to shore up their treasures, but it was also their place to do the trade with all sorts of foreign countries.
The Americans and the Allies begged the Swiss to stop taking the gold, and they refused. They continued to take gold until 1945, when the Germans had more or less lost the war.
But there was only so much gold in Europe's banks Hitler and his armies could steal. The SS were instructed to find alternative sources.
They began to run out of gold, so what did they do? They did, as we know, this terrible war crime. Before the Jews were killed in Auschwitz, they pulled the gold out of their mouths, and they melted it down into bars.
The SS stripped concentration camp victims of an estimated $70 million worth of gold teeth and jewelry. But by 1945, as the Allies swept into Germany, some Nazis began to consider the unthinkable. What if they lost? Where would they go? And what would they do with their stolen gold?
The Germans kept these gold bars and other robbed treasures, and particularly art, out of the way of anybody who might have grabbed it.
The Nazi gold was under threat. Hitler instructed the SS to make Berlin's reserves disappear.
They started to move things, to move treasures, to move gold underground in mountain deposits.
But the Americans got wind of Hitler's orders. On the 4th of April 1945, they entered the German town of Merkers and discovered a vast hoard in an abandoned salt mine. Over 8,000 gold bars, worth $240 million.
The 100 tons of gold bullion represents most of Germany's reserve.
They couldn't believe their eyes. They were just blinded by the incredible amount of gold just packed away there.
It wasn't just gold, but over 1 billion German marks, millions in foreign currency, and 400 tons worth of priceless works of art. But it was only part of the stolen hoard. The Allies knew the Nazis were on the run and looking to hide.
One of the best places to do that was Austria, and specifically the mountains of Austria and the Salzkammergut.
Secretly, the Nazis sent freight trains south in the hope of evading the Americans approaching from the west and the Russians from the east.
When those trains rolled into the Salzkammergut, they were just packed up to the top with all sorts of treasures, gold, valuables, paintings, all the Nazis finally could get hold of before they had to leave.
Some of Hitler's most senior generals fled with their loot, including second in command in the SS, Ernst Kaltenbrunner.
Kaltenbrunner, this high-ranking SS criminal, took the stuff he had collected during the years of his career and brought it back here to the Salzkammergut.
Kaltenbrunner took refuge in this house by Lake Toplitz, 16 miles from Lake Toplitz.
Kaltenbrunner tried to contact the Americans because he had these plans to make a separate peace with the Americans.
But when his overtures of negotiation were rejected, Kaltenbrunner fled, but not before burying his loot.
When Kaltenbrunner finally left the Salzkammergut and tried to flee, what he left behind and what was found was gold in his garden. He just simply took cases full of gold and hid them in his garden, and those were dug up in the first weeks after the war.
But it wasn't just Kaltenbrunner burying gold. In the south of Austria, American GIs uncovered over 700 Nazi gold bars buried in a shallow hole in the ground. and the stories of hidden Nazi gold started to percolate throughout the Salzkammergut.
There is eyewitnesses telling you about famous Nazis, just like Heinrich Müller, the head of the Gestapo, coming here in the final days of the war, riding into the Salzkammergut, together with about 15 officers on motor cars with sidecars, and that they were full of cases with valuables and gold. And they went up to the mountains and didn't come back.
But the majority of the rumors centered on one lake. The same lake that Ida Weisenbacher had witnessed boxes being thrown into. Lake Toplitz.
Toplitz is an absolutely fascinating geological phenomenon. It's a long lake. It's a ravine that's filled in as deep as Big Ben, several hundred feet.
The Nazis knew all about Lake Toplitz. Joseph Goebbels' holiday villa was close by. Because of its 103-meter depth and remote location, from 1943, it had been used as a naval testing station. In its dark waters, the Nazis experimented with underwater explosives and submarines, testing them at different depths. They fired torpedoes from underwater into the lakeside mountain, gouging out large cavities in its canyon walls.
The Germans used it to test new submarine missiles. They tested a submarine missile that eventually became the Polaris missile. So there's a lot of junk at the bottom of that lake. Used ammunition, God knows what.
Lake Toplitz was seen by SS Command as an ideal place to sink the Nazi horde and stop the Allies getting their hands on it. And one day, when things improved, they would return and retrieve it. Eyewitness Ida Weisenbacher still lives just a couple of miles from Lake Toplitz and remembers the day the SS arrived. It's the same house she lived in as a young girl when she was ordered to help them transport heavy boxes to the lake.
I said, are you crazy? Why would you throw them in the lake? No, they had to go in. There was something that didn't belong here anymore.
But precisely what was in the heavy boxes, she did not know. Could they have contained the missing Nazi gold? A week after the SS dumped their load into Lake Toplitz, on the 8th of May 1945, the Nazis surrendered. The Allied nations celebrated victory. But where was all the missing Nazi gold? After the war, as the years went by, the stories of what was thrown into Lake Toplitz grew and grew. Because of what Ida had seen and the reports of buried gold being dug up, everyone seemed to be convinced that there must be gold lying at the bottom of the lake. In the 1950s, local boy Gerhard Zauner grew up on the stories of buried treasure in Toplitz.
As children, we discovered a lot of things that were thrown into the lake after the war. I went to these places hundreds of times, and with your fingers you go through the silt. Over here one Nazi bigwig lived, and over there another, and in the lakes they lived next to you could find things.
In the post-war years, amateur divers attempted to reach the bed of Lake Toplitz to recover its Nazi treasure. But Toplitz is a highly unusual lake. No oxygen exists below 20 meters, so nothing perishes. With its steep, wooded banks, trees fall in and form a false bottom of floating logs, under which, if you get trapped, there's often no way back to the surface. Two German scientists who had worked in the Nazis' naval station during the war drowned when they attempted to get to the bottom of Toplitz. Their deaths only heightened the rumors of what was hidden in the lake. Only now, people said the lake was cursed. In the late 1950s, the stories of gold dumped into Lake Toplitz proved irresistible to one journalist. Working at Germany's biggest-selling magazine, Der Stern, investigative reporter Wolfgang Lühr had reached the top of his profession.
In those days you always had to be there first and come back with a picture and a story for the magazine. And it was tough having to be the first all the time. Wears you out. I even had a plane at my disposal.
Lühr painstakingly pieced together the story of what happened at Lake Toplitz, collating information gleaned from Nazi documents, local rumors, and even the confessions of former Nazi generals in South America.
At first, I didn't know anything about the gold. I only stumbled upon it when I did some research afterwards into how things had happened.
Based on what he'd discovered, Lühr persuaded his editors to finance the first large-scale exploration of Toplitz, on the grounds that he might just get the scoop of the decade. And it helped that Wolfgang Lühr wasn't just a journalist.
I was in the Navy. I was a naval officer during the war. So I know how to operate underwater.
Toplitz is fed from a smaller lake above and feeds into a larger lake below, which gives it a sequence of unique but dangerous currents. Lühr had to establish exactly how he could navigate the precarious movements of the lake all the way to the bottom, 103 meters down.
I had to calculate with what speed and at what level the lake would move. I did that in the winter of '58 for the first time. The lake was still frozen and was just starting to melt. And this way you can see exactly how the streams from Toplitz develop.
And even if he managed to work out the currents, getting whatever was down there to the surface presented a whole other set of problems. Lühr adapted technology he had used in the Marines.
I did the calculations and then we built ourselves a claw gripper. We had built the gripper in such a way that it opens when it goes down. And then a rope had to be pulled, so it closes when it is down. And when it was closed, we would pull the box up. You learn a lot in the Navy.
de Stern commissioned a fleet of VW Dormobiles to transport Lühr and his team of divers, photographers, and writers to Austria. But it was very much Lühr's story. He would lead the exploration and write daily reports as he went. Lühr attached to the claw gripper lights and a camera, which would relay pictures to the crew on the surface. With the information he had acquired from locals and former Nazis, Lühr had a good idea where the suspected gold had been sunk.
Using my calculations, we eased down the claw gripper, down to the 100 meters depth of the lake.
They scanned the entire lake for 2 weeks and found nothing. But Lühr was determined, and just when they were ready to give up, told his team they had to continue into the darkness.
We searched some more at night, with the camera on the bed of the lake. In the beginning, we didn't find anything. But then through the cable on the monitor, I could see there is something there. At about 11 at night, we saw a box.
Lühr's team could barely contain their excitement. Had they found the missing Nazi gold?
The camera lit up the box. Then the claw gripper came and it picked it up. When it was 2-3 meters from the surface, I stopped. Otherwise, the box would have burst open.
If they dropped the box, Lühr's story would sink with it. He wasn't going to take that risk.
I dived in, tied some rope underwater, and wrapped it around the box. Then I resurfaced and gave them the rope.
But when they brought the box to the surface, no one was sure what was inside. The next morning, the world's media waited with bated breath. Amongst the crowd was local boy Gerhard Zauner, who still remembers the day that changed his life.
For us it was sensational. We all went to Lake Toplitz with our parents to witness the salvation of this treasure. This was a big motivation for me. I had to get down there.
But it wasn't just Zauner and his family who were on tenterhooks to see what was in Lühr's recovered box.
The police came and the public. 80 or 90 people. It was a scrum. Then we pulled the box up. The box burst open. But there wasn't any gold in there.
To the crowd's astonishment, the Stern team hadn't found gold, but millions and millions of pristine British banknotes.
We brought them up, and after 16 or 17 boxes, we thought, this is nonsense. We leave them all down there and tear the lids open underwater, and then we can see if it is gold or... But they were just notes.
It was the beginning of a whole new mystery. What were these pounds? And why had they been sunk in Lake Toplitz? The mystery deepened when it was revealed the pounds weren't quite what they seemed.
Lake Toplitz in Austria, and the end of a long search which for years puzzled Scotland Yard and the international police. Down there at the bottom of the lake are boxes of printing plates and notes, the clue to what must be the biggest forgery of all time.
What Lühr and his Dustern team had discovered wasn't gold, but 73 million pounds worth of perfectly forged banknotes. The equivalent of almost 3 billion pounds in today's money. Just why they were there, nobody knew. But unraveling the mystery of the counterfeit pounds would make Wolfgang Lühr's name.
Lühr was consumed by this the way almost anybody who gets involved with it does. It was a tremendous sensation. He got a lot of publicity and a lot of very good stories.
Over 15 editions, Dustern slowly unpicked the truth behind the mystery of Lake Toplitz. What Lühr had found was evidence of the biggest counterfeiting operation in history.
The idea of counterfeiting British pounds was actually conceived in the first week of the war.
The Nazis' plan was to destabilize the pound as the world's reserve currency and bring the British Empire to its knees. Great Britain would be subsumed into the 1,000-year Reich. The Bank of England was convinced its banknotes were unforgeable. But the German SS had other ideas. Its head, Heinrich Himmler, was in charge of the plan. And he had just the person to put it into practice. An SS officer with a background in engineering and a speciality in forging passports had come to Himmler's attention. His name was Bernhard Krüger. Himmler told Krüger he would even name the operation after him, Operation Bernhard. It was an offer Krüger couldn't refuse. Krüger was instructed by Himmler to use Jewish counterfeiters and artists to make his pounds. Many of them were already at the Nazis' disposal.
Krüger went to Auschwitz, saying, please have everybody, any one of your Jewish prisoners who speaks German and is connected with the graphic arts, just pull their names out and get them ready. And he assembled, over a period of about a year or two, 140 Jewish prisoners in the Sachsenhausen concentration camp just north of Berlin, which was actually the headquarters of all the concentration camps.
Krüger then had to decide which pound note was the easiest for his Sachsenhausen team to forge.
They decided to print 5-pound notes, big, impressive 5-pound notes, black and white notes, easy to print. This man was a very meticulous engineer by training, and he got plates that were sent by the Reichsbank's engravers, and they adjusted these plates with all of the special secret markings that the British put on the pounds.
They wanted to make really perfect pound notes. Those pound notes, of course, were part of their plans They were supposed to be used for international finance.
Wolfgang Lühr's De Stern articles revealed that in September 1942, the first Sachsenhausen-produced forged pounds had made their way into circulation over the Channel. They were technically brilliant, almost undetectable. The Bank of England declared them the most dangerous forgeries they'd ever seen. Soon, a flood of forged pounds were appearing, used by the Nazis to buy weapons and yet more gold. The Nazi plan was working. Sterling began to lose value. But Himmler and the SS had bigger ideas.
They came up with this crazy idea that if they print millions of fake pounds and drop them over England, that the British economy would just blow up and collapse.
Himmler wanted Goering's Luftwaffe to airdrop the forgeries over Britain, rendering the pound worthless. They certainly had enough forgeries. Between 1942 and 1945, the Sachsenhausen counterfeiters produced 134 million fake pounds.
That represents roughly 13% of the billion pounds in circulation throughout the world.
The pound was becoming a suspect currency. Nobody knew which were real and which were the Führer's forgeries.
This was the greatest counterfeit in history. Captain Krüger, who was in charge of this, boasted quite correctly after the war, "I am the greatest counterfeiter in history," which he was. There's nothing even near it.
But Himmler's idea of a huge airdrop was never realized. The Germans were losing the war. The Luftwaffe simply didn't have enough planes to put the idea into practice. As the Allies approached in 1945, Krüger knew his life and that of his counterfeiters had little meaning to his boss, Heinrich Himmler, who was desperately trying to hide evidence of his appalling crimes.
Krüger realized that not only when the thing was shut down that the Jews would get killed, but he, as the bearer of a state secret, probably would get killed too. So the interests of both the SS major and the Jews began to converge.
Krüger ordered his men to escape and burn all the evidence of his extraordinary counterfeiting operation. The trouble was, burning millions of pounds was more difficult than Krüger realized.
Why didn't they just destroy them? The point is, they did try to destroy a number of them. They had orders to burn them and leave not a trace of any pound in the ashes. And they buried the ashes.
But there were just too many pounds to destroy. So Krüger sent a unit with forgeries boxed in weighted, waterproof crates, each weighing 200 pounds, to the Salzkammergut. Their destination was Lake Toplitz, as proved by Wolfgang Lühr, who pulled them to the surface in 1959.
The intelligence service of the SS, in cahoots with high-level experts, brought the boxes to the Toplitz in Austria. I knew that the boxes were thrown into Toplitz, and I knew who threw them in.
Lühr revealed that the SS unit were told very specifically to attempt to find a way of retrieving the boxes after the war.
They take the coffins full of counterfeit pounds and they sink them in the lake, but not completely, because each one of those coffins is attached to a rope.
Und dann wurden diese Kisten
These boxes were tied up to wooden floats with a rope and thrown into the water.
und ins Wasser geschmissen. Und ein Bild ist auch da.
And in one of the pictures, a little boy, my son, is pulling the float with a rope attached to it.
The ropes from the boxes were attached to logs that would float and indicate where they had been sunk. That way, the SS believed they would one day return and reclaim their sunken loot. Once Lühr had discovered the truth, the Austrian government, on instructions from the Bank of England, destroyed Krüger's pounds. But such was the scale of the counterfeiting operation. Today, there are almost 3 times more counterfeits than originals left in existence.
To me, the profound irony of the pounds is that the real fakes, and there are some fake fakes actually, that is people trying to cash in on it, the real fakes which fetch, 10s, 20s, 30s, 50 pounds, far more valuable than their face value, sometimes 100 pounds if they're good ones in good condition.
But had Wolfgang Lühr unraveled the mystery of Lake Toplitz once and for all? Were the stories of sunken gold just stories after all? Questions remained. If Toplitz only contained forged pounds, what was in the heavier boxes, as seen by Ida Weisenbacher that day the SS arrived at her door? Could they have contained gold?
Stimmt.
Absolutely, absolutely. All these boxes haven't been taken out. I'm convinced. There were these small, heavy boxes with the handles. I don't know, but maybe there was gold in there. The gold must be really deep down.
It's not such a far-fetched idea. Even the man who found the forged pounds in Lake Toplitz is convinced another unit of SS officers were responsible for the disposal of Nazi gold.
There was a different group that transported boxes with gold to Austria. There are probably gold boxes down there. They're still there. The place can still be found today. I can even show you on a photo.
Lühr's convinced this photograph, taken by a naval officer at the time, shows pounds being thrown into the lake in the foreground, but gold being sunk in the back. The rumors of sunken gold remain so strong that in 1963, 4 years after de Stern's revelations, a young diver from Munich drowned looking for it. Whilst searching for the body, the Austrian government mounted the first official exploration of the lake. They pulled to the surface equipment from Sachsenhausen and yet more counterfeit pounds, but no gold. After that, the authorities introduced a ban on all underwater explorations of Toplitz, which still exists today. But that didn't stop one man, Gerhard Zauner, who as a boy had witnessed Wolfgang Lühr raising the forged pounds from the depths all those years ago.
It is my world. It is my favorite lake because historically it's the hottest.
Zauner has dived for gold and other treasures more times than anyone else in the Salzkammergut. He's pulled so much Nazi memorabilia from the bottom of the Austrian lakes, he's even opened his own museum.
We've had bayonets, rifles, handguns, hypodermic needles, 3 big round mines. One of them is in the restaurant at Toplitz.
But Zauner never discovered gold until 1987. On the 1st of April, Zauner pulled from the depths 14 perfectly preserved gold bars. Gerhard Zauner, the local dive enthusiast, had raised the Nazi gold. Finally, someone had found it. But all was not as it seemed.
We had a very unpleasant policeman who examined my car's tires. They were worn out. He made me pay the maximum fine. But he was actually right. And we thought we were going to do a prank on him. So we had gold bars made and we sank them.
It was all just an April Fool's joke by Zauner to get back at his local policeman.
We said it wasn't gold, but the police said it was as it was heavy. They took it away, and after 3 days they found out it wasn't gold after all. No one knows the policeman's real name now. Everyone just calls him Goldfinger.
Even today, Zauner's hoax hasn't stopped the stories of Nazi gold in Lake Toplitz from persisting.
There are so many funny stories the Austrians tell about it, because they say there's all these nutty Americans and British coming to Lake Toplitz and we're just making jokes with them.
Any story that says, look, there's gold in them thar hills or them thar lakes is going to attract people who will say, let me go after it and look for it. Because after all, if you find it, you've hit the jackpot.
The mystery of what really lies at the bottom of the devil's dustbin may never be solved.
Today, Toplitz is a bit of a secret. It doesn't want to show all it's got, does it?
One thing is for sure, there's large amounts of gold and other valuables in the Salzkammergut that have not been found.